Happy Friday, ladies and gents. Today we're talking with Kyle Mann, novelist and editor-in-chief at the BabylonBee, the internet's most popular destination for conservative disinformation and fake news. We'll be chatting about satire, humor, modern-day allegories, and his new book, The Postmodern Pilgrim's Progress. Today is going to be fun, so let's get to it. Kyle, thanks for joining us on today's show.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, guys. It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, today is really big. We have big news from the Supreme Court. They just struck down Roe versus Wade. So I'm sure a conservative satire site like yours has a lot to say about it, to make up about it. Yeah. And then I've been doing a VBS, so I'm kind of exhausted, and it's been a wild and fun, crazy week. Kalene, what have you been up to?
Edits and trying to wrangle my daughter not bothering me because it's summertime. So
yes,
all of my workday hours are now she's home hours. So that's always fun.
And it's the end of your week, Kyle, but you've got a lot more to do. So how have you been?
I'm tired. It's been a long week. Every morning I wake up and we have to check and see if Roe v. Wade's been overturned yet, because obviously if Roe v. Wade gets overturned, it's going to change everything that we're publishing that day. So I've just been sitting there constantly refreshing the SCOTUS blog, Twitter, oh please, so finally happened this morning, and so today's been a bit of a crazy day for us, but yeah, other than that, doing good. Just writing satire and trying to write some bangers,
Yeah, you made a huge shift in your career from writing short posts for the BabylonBee, humor, satire. So just for people who don't know the BabylonBee, they take news and they make a fake spin on it, or they make up fake news, often kind of critiquing the church and critiquing church culture, and something that we can kind of all laugh at together and have a good time and enjoy together. Or how would you guys put it? What is the BabylonBee?
Yeah, so we write news satire, which is, like you said, kind of a spin on the news. It's The Onion was kind of the one that popularized the idea of doing these up-to-the-minute headlines that reflect something that's going on that day, and you do a satirical twist on it. There had been satirical news magazines and such before, but they were the ones that kind of perfected that art of getting the whole joke in the headline and making some witty commentary on something that happened that day, originally in their print publication, and then eventually online. So yeah, we write a headline that either makes a point or maybe doesn't make any point and just tries to make you laugh. And a lot of it is pulled from current events or just everyday life experiences or church satire, theology, all that kind of stuff. So we try to do a wide range of topics depending on what's going on that day.
How did you guys decide this is what we want to do? The world needs a conservative version of The Onion.
Well, I mean, it definitely was something like that. It definitely was. The Onion is so effective, and it's become such a cultural institution. But they hate me. Yeah, but they hate my worldview. So, but there was enormous respect for the Onion's ability to communicate a point using satire that we were pretty jealous of. And there wasn't anything doing that from our worldview. So Adam Ford launched it in 2016. I think he had read some headline that he liked on The Onion that was, he hated the point it was making, but he was like, man, that's so clever. I wish these guys agreed with me. I wish these guys are on my side. I think it was something like the Supreme Court justices who voted against, I don't know if it was the gay marriage thing or if it was the healthcare thing, but it was like the justices that voted against that suddenly realize that they're going to be the villains in a movie in 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, man, that's so clever. I disagree with what you're saying, but I respect the way that you made that point. And so that's kind of what we wanted to do from our worldview and from our perspective. So that's that's where it came from.
So you can use humor to talk about a subject, and you don't have to agree, but you can all laugh at the same joke kind of together.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a G.K. Chesterton quote that I cite often where he says, humor can get in under the door while seriousness is still fumbling at the handle. And that's kind of the ethos that we live by, is that there's so much discussion out there about everything that happens, whether it's today's decision from SCOTUS or we were talking about gun control yesterday. That is the kind of stuff that there's so many opinions flying out there. There's so many blog posts and think pieces and so many tweets. There's way too many tweets out there. And everybody's got a hot take.
Even the
but to be
bots.
able, even the bot, all 90% of the bots on Twitter. But to be able to make a point like succinctly that makes you laugh, and then your guard is down a little bit because you think, oh, that's funny, it's harmless, it's a joke, and then you think about it a little bit, and so it makes you laugh, and then it makes you think, and you go, well, maybe there's something to that. Maybe these guys do have a point after all. So that's kind of what satire does, and then obviously a lot of it is just not trying to make a political point. It's just silly, lighthearted humor as well, and that's a good thing, we think, also.
Yeah.
That's got to be a hard line to kind of skate, because you're just like, dude, it's just a joke, calm down. But at the same time, you're like, but maybe a point.
Exactly. Well, that's the balance. That is the balance. Is as a comedian, we walk this line where as a comedian, your goal is to make people laugh. That is above everything. That's supreme. You're supposed to be funny. At the same time, it's like, but we're also kind of sneaking this point in. And if the comedy is so out there that it covers up the point, or it makes light of something that maybe you shouldn't be making light of, or the tone doesn't match the seriousness of the subject matter, that's really going to step on the point that you're trying to make, or it's going to step on the humor altogether. So it's a constant line you're trying to walk. But I think it is a balance between, there are things there is truth we're trying to communicate by making up fake stories that make you laugh. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and get the discussion rolling. And we will be getting into satire, the power of satire, and how we can use it in our writing to bring people together and to communicate that message. But first, Kyle, I want to hear about your writer's journey, how you got into writing in the first place, and then especially how you came up with this idea for the Postmodern Pilgrim's Progress and where this novel came from.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always loved writing, but mostly short form. I'd never written something longer form like this before, and I always loved reading. I grew up just consuming. I put my parents out of house and home by I had them buy me a new Star Wars novel every week. Growing up, and I just had mountains and mountains of the cheesy, pulpy looking sci-fi novels. So I always loved it. I always loved the way an author could take you to another place. Stephen King has a line about how writing is the closest thing we have to telepathy, because an author hundreds of years ago can picture a scene, and only by making marks on a paper can make you picture the exact same scene that's in his head. And it's such a cool thing, and I love it. And the part of that is what attracted me to the BabylonBee too, is that while we do have a visual element with our Photoshops, like it's not. We do have some videos too and stuff, but it's not. Primarily what we do is you make a point, or you make someone laugh, or you make someone picture a scenario, just with a little 70 character headline or 100 character headline, and how effective you can be with that brief space is so cool to me. But yeah, this novel I wrote when I first started writing for the BabylonBee back in 2016. I started tinkering with this idea to take John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress and to put it in the modern day, to give it a humorous twist. There's tinges of sci-fi, and it's just kind of this low fantasy in the vein of Discworld or Hitchhiker's Guide. Not that I'm anywhere near the level of those authors, but that kind of edge to the commentary and the narrator's voice. And that kind of slowly developed. It, as most of my projects do, it ended up sitting in a drawer for a few years, and then I dusted it off more recently and started taking it to some publishers, and it ended up landing with Salem, which is a crazy fun process. And you're right. I mean, like you said, it is a shift because, as I'm sure any authors listening know, it's like the difference between writing something really quick and throwing it up on the internet and you instantly have 100 laugh emojis or whatever, to pouring years of your life into something and having no idea if anybody's going to like it is that is a vast gulf in the way that you have to think creatively. So that's kind of the journey. And then we spent the last year or so getting it ready for publication, and then it just got published a few weeks ago.
Well, congratulations on that, because that definitely is like a big feat. I wrote long and then wrote short, just so that I could understand writing long better. So my point is, you were writing short for so long that writing longer, I think it helped. I think in the end, it would help in a way. So that's exciting.
Yeah. Do you have any tips that you picked up from your work writing short articles quick, going for the humor, going for the single focus point, that helped you as a novelist later, or that might help people out there?
Yeah, well, it's a double-edged sword. The negative side of writing a bunch of short form, and our articles are short on the BabylonBee. It's shorter than you'd think of a typical, even a little satirical article. It's 200 words or less typically. So it's very short. The negative side of it is you have to make the 200 words count so much that you're jumping right to the punchline. If we write an article where some political figure, Donald Trump, rides a unicycle over Niagara Falls or whatever, like that article is going to be packed with like little Trumpisms, and you set it up right away, like right in the opening paragraph. You're like, according to sources, Donald Trump, jumped on a unicycle today to ride over Niagara Falls so he could show he's better than Joe Biden, who fell off a bike. Like, and it has to be punched with the humor throughout, and you can't lose people's attention because you've only got the 200 words. So that almost sounds like a positive, but the negative side of that is that, novels, you need a little more room to breathe. You need a little more of stitching things together to get somewhere. So when I started writing this, I wrote the big, fun, exciting moments. Like I wrote there's a moment like where they get, in the 3-act structure, it's the midpoint. The big false height. They get to the top of this peak, and there's a big emotional moment. It's like I wrote that like the second thing I wrote. I wrote the beginning, and then I wrote that, and then I wrote the end of the book where there's the big character moment and climax, and then that got thrown in a drawer because I didn't have the endurance to go, oh, now I have to write the boring scene where they're walking from here to here, So that's the negative side of it, is you don't learn the writer's discipline to go, I'm going to sit down and write 1,000 words today or 2,000 words today, no matter if it's boring or it's the exciting part, and you do have to kind of write those stitching scenes that aren't as fun. You have to find the joy and humor and the fun parts of that. But in terms of positives, I think, like I was saying, because we do have to kind of make every line funny in an article. That was really our goal with this book, and our other, like our BabylonBee guides that we write, is like, I'm always looking at something and going, there's a line like, the characters walked from, then they continued on their journey or whatever. And I'm like, can we make that funny? Is there like a punch up there? Is there some more interesting way I can say that? Because you do learn that discipline of like, every line has to continue to capture the reader's attention. So I think that was a positive. So that allowed us to write some of the stitching stuff and some of the more minor encounters in a fun way, like, cause I just treated each little encounter like I was writing a tiny BabylonBee article as part of a larger story.
Honestly, you have no idea how strong of a positive that really is.
Yeah.
I can't even tell you. It's an amount. It's no longer a number. how many times I delete walking, looking. I don't care that they're walking. Like, they've been walking this whole time. I don't care. They walked through the room. Okay, well, they already entered the room, and I know they're going. Just tell me where they're going. I can fill it in myself.
Oh man.
So
Yeah,
like,
it was-
it's a huge positive that you
So-
have that strength of.
Well, like like Stephen King's on writing, he has a great in that book. He has a great bit about. I think towards the end of the book, he does an example of a few ways you can write a scene. Like it's like a guy walking into a bar off the streets of New York or something. And it's like he walked in, he saw this, he saw that, he walked through here. And then he shows how you can do that exact same thing by just saying like mentioning two elements of the room, and then you're like, if you read that, you picture the exact same scene in your head.
God, all day
You know?
long, dude. That is my comment all day long. It's like, all you need is this. I see the thing that you wrote here. I don't need it. We don't need it.
Well, I struggle too a little bit with like action scenes or like fights. It's I'm like, and then he took his left hand and grabbed this, and then he put his right hand on that. You're just like, wait, no, people understand how a sword is picked up. Like you don't need to go through.
I don't need to know he picked it up with his right hand, swung it left over his head and down, and the guy to the north on the right side of the middle person. You've already lost me. Yeah.
Where does that come from? That temptation to just like say all the things, the glancing and the getting up and the closing the door and the coughing and pausing.
I think it comes from a place of fear, Like I think you're writing from a place of, I am afraid that the person reading this, that my writing's not strong enough, and the person reading this isn't going to understand what I'm saying. Like there's a lack of trust. There's a lack of trust in the reader,
You've got to trust your readers to follow the story.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had to learn that, it's lessons. It's crazy that I've read hundreds of novels, and then to write one, and you're sitting down like, wait, I've completely forgotten everything about how a scene is written or how you just forget. It's like it is such a different process,
Well, it sounds like part of your process too was getting the words out, and that took time. That maybe took a couple years, but then you took the last year to kind of revise it and to take that. So what did that revision stage look like when you had all those scenes kind of patched together, and then you started like turning this into a novel, making it feel and sound and listen like a novel?
Yeah. Well, let me back up. So basically I had like, I don't know, 10,000 words written. And like I said, I kind of wrote these highlights, and I had these great quotes, I wanted to include, and a line of prose would come to me, and I'd throw it in a document. And then I had this, and it was just unfinished and not really fleshed out and sitting there. So I got with my managing editor, Joel Berry, who's my co-author on this book, and I showed him that old document, and us just bouncing ideas off each other really came to this. We have this narrator character in the book who introduces the story and then tells you, here's the story I'm going to tell you, and blah, blah, blah. And he's very much the voice of the kind of Terry Pratchett and Hitchhiker's Guide type voice, where he's this angelic type character who's like very confused by humans, and he's like, why did you, he's constantly commenting on the characters, like, and our protagonist is an idiot, so he does this, and that's. And commenting on how stupid the things we do are, how stupid the way that humans fall into temptation or do this or that or stray from the path. And he's like, come on, you guys are morons. So that element really was what lit the fire of like, because I think the pitch of, and my publisher actually told me like that they get pitches to rewrite Pilgrim's Progress like every year. They probably get like 15 or 20 pitches to do this. He's like, and they just, it's just not an original idea. But because we had this twist, like it's Pilgrim's Progress, but it's satirical, it's funny. There's a funny element to it. It's not just retelling this in a boring way. That little twist that we added was actually what got the book published. So there is this element where you had lightning striking of these two kind of ideas clashing together. So then once we actually signed the book contract with our publisher, Salem, we had about 6 months to finish it. So that's when we sat down, did the 3 or 4 months of grueling, writing the boring walking scenes. And then from there, we had a couple months of punch-up runs where we would read the whole book, add jokes, fix inconsistencies. It was with my co-author, Joel. So there was times where I said, like, and Ryan pulled out his sword and blah blah blah, and Joel's tells me, oh, I actually destroyed the sword 5 chapters ago, and I'm like, oh crap, now I gotta I gotta figure something out. So there was a lot of rewriting, editing, copy editing, and then right before we've submitted our I don't want to say final draft, but our kind of near final draft to the publisher, we had we brought in a trusted group of friends, so about 6 or 7 people who are familiar with the BabylonBee style. We knew we could trust their honest feedback, and we had them read through the book and send us notes, both in terms of errors and typos and inconsistencies, and did you like the book? What was your favorite part? Was there anything you didn't understand? So we did a final rewrite, sent it to the publisher. Then they had comments, and we probably went through about 2 or 3 back and forths with the publisher before we landed on our final draft.
It can be a process. Oh yes.
And the good news there is it doesn't have to be perfect the first time around. You can have the boring stuff that comes to you when you're in the middle of writing, and you just get it out on the page, and then you've got all that time in the future to revise it and to find a different way to do it and to get other feedback and make it even better.
And I do want to interject just a random notation. I don't call them boring moments. I call them the quiet moments. Because if they're boring, then they don't need to be in there anyway. But we do need the quiet moments because not everything can be pew pew bang bang.
Well, I agree. Okay, so my taste in fiction I'm of 2 minds about that, because I think my favorite book of all time is Lord of the Rings, which has tons of walking, But the only reason that the scene where Gandalf is standing alone against the king of the Nazgul, who steps into Minas Tirith, the very first enemy to break the gates of Minas Tirith ever, and Rohan arrives just in time, and he hears the horns, and the chapter ends. The only reason you get goosebumps in that chapter is because you read 800 pages of walking, to get there. I think there's an earned epicness, to those moments that you cannot fake with every moment being epic or just kind of condensing down, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then
that's why they're the quiet moments.
Right.
They sneak up on you, and then suddenly you're just slapped in the face with awesome. But it wouldn't be as awesome if you weren't in going through the hallway and it's all quiet and the eerie music's starting, and then the monster comes out, and
yeah, and I totally agree. But the other thing I will say of that, like I said, I've got a little bit of 2 minds about it, is that I do think authors in the past, say in the pulp era, the pulp fiction era, guys like C.S. Lewis with the Chronicles of Narnia, guys like Robert E. Howard with the Conan stories, guys like H.P. Lovecraft with his Cthulhu stories, they were able to achieve that effect. They didn't have the epicness, okay? So they didn't have what Tolkien did. But they were able to be so much more compact and efficient with their words, to where you read something like Chronicles of Narnia, this first Chronicles of Narnia, Lion the Witch, the Wardrobe, and it's it blows by, and you're just... I love those books that you can read in 3 hours, and you sit down and you're and then you just sit there in your chair for an hour thinking about it. There was an efficiency to the way that they wrote, where they didn't need the big, you didn't need to be Robert Jordan and write 13 novels to get to your point. I do really appreciate the efficiency, and maybe that comes from writing so much for the BabylonBee, where that is more of the style.
Now, who is your book written to? Who is the audience that you're thinking of? Because on the one hand, you've got a lot of Christian references. It's, from Pilgrim's Progress. It's an allegory. So it's an allegory where the stories and the symbols all represent something. So you're kind of expecting your audience to understand the symbols, but your main character is an agnostic. So he himself is not coming from that background.
Yeah, so we did kind of squarely target this at the Christian market. So I don't think I think too often there's a unrealistic optimism with Christian authors that this is going to be the big crossover success that you can give this to your atheist friends and they'll suddenly believe. I think and so we're not really under that delusion. I do think an agnostic could get certain things out of this book because of the way that we try to honestly we try to honestly address in agnostics challenges to the Christian faith, or like you said, the main character is an agnostic, but it's written towards Christians. So the reason we made him an agnostic is that Christians share some of those doubts. We share some of those moments of doubt and fear. Can God actually be good when this just happened in my life? And we wanted to honestly present those questions, because Christian art tends to not do that. Like, Christian art tends to give you the perfect Christian hero kid who debates his atheist professor, and then the atheist gets hit by a truck, and they all go to a Newsboys concert and everybody's happy. Like, that is just for one example, but that is not what we wanted to do. Like, we wanted this to be something where the doubts that this character has about God's existence are real. And I don't know that we ever even address them in the book, in the sense that we don't say, I guess maybe spoiler alert, I don't know. But we don't really get to the point where it's like, I have accepted Jesus and now all these doubts are gone. And now I don't believe those things anymore. Now I believe in Jesus and everything's wonderful. It's like, at the end of the book, doubt still lingers. At the end of the book, there is still this question of, how those questions are real, but we need to kind of take them in faith and honestly struggle with them. So hopefully that answers your question at least a little bit.
Yeah, your main character is honestly wrestling with his personal struggles. It's not like you have the answer ahead of time for him, but you're letting him, say what he's actually feeling, and confront other characters who are being genuine to where they're coming from too, and they can kind of debate.
Exactly. So later on in the book, we even have an atheist character who confronts them, and it's done in kind of a funny way. We have him, he's wearing the classic atheist fedora, and he's kind of giving some of the more over the top atheist arguments. He's sitting there in sight of heaven, which in our allegorical world is called the Golden City, and he can see the cityscape of the Golden City. He can see the King's Road right there that the king himself built, and he's arguing like, oh no, this all just evolved over millions of years, and that's just an illusion. And the evidence is in front of his eyes, and he's rejecting it. So we're obviously making a theological point there. But then our characters kind of go through this place called the Valley of Doubt, where they can no longer see the Golden City. They're trapped. They've been captured, and they go, well, maybe he was right. Like, maybe we were the ones who were wrong. Who, even though we kind of make fun of him in that chapter, we try to like actually present these challenges. Like, how do like, in our greatest moments of doubt, we sit there and think about the atheist arguments honestly as Christians, and we're like, oh my gosh, there is no God. I'm completely wrong. And C.S. Lewis once said that while he does have those moments of doubt as a Christian, he has to remember that as an atheist, he had those moments of doubt as well. Like, where, oh my gosh, I'm wrong. There is a God, and we always assume that our side is the only one that doubts. So,
doubt, the human condition.
Yeah. Kalene, I think you have a blurb to read for this book, so we can kind of introduce the audience to this novel.
Yes. Speaking of, this double week's spotlight is The Postmodern Pilgrim's Progress, an allegorical tale by Joel Berry and Kyle Mann. From the editor-in-chief and managing editor of the BabylonBee, a millennial seeker travels through a 21st century take on the Pilgrim's Progress, with allegorical versions of all our modern vices tempting him along the way, as well as a few timeless, personified virtues that just might see him through. Biting satire and uncommon wisdom from the creators of the internet's most influential comedy site, and an author of national bestseller The BabylonBee Guide to Wokeness. Ryan Fleming is a young agnostic reeling from his brother's death. Though he is deeply angry with God, he makes good on a promise he made to his brother in the final moments of his life, to visit a church at least once. But shortly after his arrival, the slick megachurch's shoddily installed video projector falls on his head, sending Ryan through a wormhole into another world. After a narrow escape from the city of destruction, where the comfortably numb townspeople are oblivious to the fire and brimstone falling like bombs in their midst and destroying their homes, Ryan finds himself on a quest. To make it back to his own universe, he must partner with a woman named Faith to awaken a long-sleeping king, the World Maker, who can make all things new. Replete with characters ripped straight from the 21st century American church, including Radical, Mr. Satan, the Smiling Preacher, and others. This sometimes humorous, always insightful trek parallels Christian's fictional journey in Pilgrim's Progress. Prepare to laugh, cry, cringe, feel convicted, and ultimately be changed by the time the story ends. The Postmodern Pilgrim's Progress is brought to you by Kyle Mann and Joel Berry, the two comedic minds behind the BabylonBee, which, with 250,000 newsletter subscribers and more than 15 million page views per month, is the most popular satirical news site on the planet. Click now and buy or doom.
Yeah.
You want to get that book?
Yeah.
I really should read this.
Yeah. You've only read
Wait a
it
minute.
again and again and again in editing and again and again.
Yeah, you've only read like about 4 million words worth of it by now, so yeah.
Right.
It's pretty good if you want to read it again.
Yeah.
Was there something that you changed in your journey as a result of writing this book or thinking through these characters, struggling with these different ideas with your main character, Ryan?
Yeah, something I changed about the character.
Or just, changed the book or in yourself, like in your, I don't know, writing habits or in your thought process or anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I'm alternately muting my microphone because we have like 15 cats and they keep wandering in here.
We could take cats.
Oh, kitties! Yeah. We need a kitty break.
If anyone would like to adopt a cat, please let me know. But so I think the like, again, going back to the discussion about the short form versus the long form stuff, the discipline of actually sitting down and writing your stuff and making the time and space in your day to go, this is my writing time and I'm going to get down 1,500 words, even if they're terrible, is something that I learned. I had to learn the discipline of. I did with the BabylonBee. You have the instant gratification of the audience. You have the little mini deadlines throughout the day. Like I need to get up 8 articles, and one needs to go out in an hour, one needs to go out in 2 hours, one needs to go in 3 hours, and so you can kind of space it out that way. But to not have that instant reward and still be able to go, I need to sit down and pump out the 1,000 words, I think is something that was really, really cool for me to learn. And I'm interested to see the next time I write a book if how that discipline will hold up. That I think, again, sorry to keep bringing up Stephen King in his On Writing book, but he talks about his writing process of like, it's crazy. It's like he gets up at 6 a.m. every day. I will write 5,000 words today. Takes a nap at noon. and then reads books the rest of the day. So that's his process. That doesn't have to be my process or your process, but I do think there's something to be said for, I don't know. I see so many other authors, and I'm sure there's memes about it and stuff, but the authors who are like on Twitter tweeting about writing, and I'm like, why are you on Twitter? Like you're tweeting about writing. And that struggle because of the instant gratification of social media, like, oh my gosh, I wonder how many amazing novels we've been robbed of because of social media, because people just don't finish their projects. I mean, so I had to learn that process. I had to learn how to close the door and be disciplined enough to say, okay, I'm not gonna do my usual Saturday morning. All the kids are in bed. I'm gonna play video games, but I'm gonna spend the time and put in the work, get these few thousand words down, even knowing that I'm probably gonna delete all of them later.
That sucks. Like, you get them out of your head. And just because you delete all those words doesn't mean they didn't work for you, because it brought you to a better, area for the book, because you're like, well, that's not working. Ooh, that gave me an idea. Is just as important as 1,000 fantastic words that do stay in the book. So
Yeah,
there's go ahead.
Or it gave Joel an idea because Joel read something you wrote, and then he's like, "Oh, brilliant narrator coming in from above." The narrator angel guy, writing on his stuff.
I don't think he ever called me brilliant, but
Oh.
really sad. No, there's definitely something to that. There's definitely something to, again, like we talked about everything, like the over description coming from a place of fear and a place of not trusting your audience. I think too, there's an element where not writing comes from a place of fear that, like, this is going to be bad, or I'm not going to be able to use it, or like not trusting yourself enough as an author to go, there are limitless ideas inside of me. Like, I'm sorry, I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but
You're okay.
I've
We
been
love
writing
tangents.
I've been writing for the BabylonBee since March 2016, and I've probably written 3 or 4 articles a day since then. And every single day I wake up and go, I'm out of ideas. I'm never going to think of another funny headline again in my life. I have no more. There's nothing. And I think there's a temptation as an author too to stare at the page. Seinfeld talks about how he doesn't like writing on the computer because there's a little blinking cursor that goes like, what does he say? That it says to you, well, what do you got? And there's an intimidation, like, yeah, I'm waiting. Come on. I think we get too intimidated by that. Like, pour something out there. And I mean, some of the best moments in our book that I wrote was the day when I sat down and I was like, I have no idea how to write this scene. Like, it was funny in our heads. The idea sounded great at the time. And now I have to actually describe how this happens. And then later on, I go back and I read that section and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just, it's beautiful. I love that section. Or Joel wrote something and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it came out so good. So you got to trust yourself as an author that stuff is going to be able to be used. Or even if you trash something, you've grown as an author through the process of writing it.
Yeah. And also writing for the BabylonBee might give you some courage too, to just, say your thing, to get the words out there. Find that headline, like you were saying, when you wake up and you thought you didn't have one. But also to be bold with the words that you're getting out there, and you can't control it once it's out there. Who's going to read your book, how they're going to respond to it, what they're going to think of
that one. Sorry.
It's out of your hands at that point. So that takes courage. That takes a massive amount of courage to just put it out there.
It does. And I just want to say, don't try and force people to, see any kind of view, which is why I like the idea of this book that you guys have written, because you're hitting on a lot of very, like, people hear this sort of stuff, or a lot of different people hear this sort of topic and they're just like, and it could be hard to talk about. So the fact that you're, just going at it and just hitting all the nails on the head, and then just putting it out there, I think is awesome. And yeah, at the end of the day, you can't help people's views, opinions.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I think there is an element of, like, obviously you write these book pitches, and we pitch this to traditional publishers, which is how it ended up getting made, is through Salem Books. But so there's an element where you're thinking about marketing, you're thinking about how can this appeal to, what market is this going to appeal to, and what's the different cross sections, and how do we frame this correctly. But there's another element where, like, I just loved this book idea in a vacuum, and even if me and my mom are the only ones who like it, I would be okay with that. And I think that's key to having that courage, is going, I love this book idea. I love this book. And then the marketing piece is a separate piece, and you have to separate those things in your mind. Maybe your book doesn't hit. Maybe your book, our book got rejected by quite a few publishers before it landed with Salem. And we're the guys behind the BabylonBee. Like, we had a bit, we could go pitch it to publishers and say, we have hundreds of thousands of, people that we can immediately directly market this to on our email list, buy this book, and it's a sure thing for them because of that. And still there was a lot of publishers that said I think the main kind of feedback that was going around was, it's too weird. You're doing something weird. It's sci-fi and fantasy, and there's a multiverse thing, and it's Pilgrim's Progress, and it's funny, but it's serious. Like, pick a lane, make it more homogenous, make it standard, make it fit into a box, you know.
You're like,
and
you do realize I'm with the BabylonBee, right?
did I mention who I am? You know,
Yeah.
that's yeah.
Yeah, 250,000 subscribers to your newsletter. So why did you guys go with a publisher and not just publish it yourself and get, all the royalties?
Yeah, well, there are pros and cons. So I'm sure you and all your audience knows, but it's a give and take. I know what my strength is, and my strength is having ideas. I don't know if they're good ideas, but I have ideas, and I know that I can write some funny stuff. I know I can write some serious stuff. I know that I'm an okay writer. I mean, I don't know how good, but I know that I can write things. I can put words down on a paper. That's my main marketable skill.
And they make sense.
And they make somewhat sense. Yeah, there's some kind of sense there. There's some sort of logic. But my strength is not the would not be the promotion, the actual putting together of a book, the nuts and bolts of like getting something printed or running a Kickstarter campaign, having that consume my life for 30 days. So that was a key element for us deciding to go with a traditional publisher. They do bring some things to the table that you don't think about when you're doing a Kickstarter, like they can book you on 50 podcasts for launch week or launch month. And yes, you can do that yourself, but there's a lot more of a process there. That's going to end up reaching different markets than just, the followers that you already have. So the hope is by going through a traditional publisher, when we have a wide audience, is that we can sell it to our audience still. And then you're hitting the radio circuit and you're targeting people that haven't heard of the BabylonBee before. And then you're hitting a second market. They have all those contacts. They have. Here's another key part of the process. I'm sure you guys have talked about this on the show before, but the traditional publisher model forces you to really make your pitch good early on in the process. It forces you to hammer that out, because we had to straighten some things out, even like because we pitched it to our book agent, and then we had all of these rounds of revision, and then we pitched it to publishers, and from that we had feedback to then when we actually got a book deal and then started writing the book, we now had a much more refined version of what we wanted to do versus, hey, let's retell Pilgrim's Progress. Because you can do a Kickstarter just off that. Let's retell Pilgrim's Progress, and you can run a Kickstarter and raise hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then be like, "Oh crap, we don't have, we don't have to know what this book is yet. Now I have to write this book." So it helped us to front load a lot of that creative feedback and work. I do like that the traditional, for better or worse, the traditional publishing model is kind of a gatekeeper, and that has probably decades in the past, that prevented some really good books from being widely read or from being published. But it also prevented some really bad books from being published. So there is a double-edged sword to the traditional publisher model. I, for one, the way that I work, I liked having a deadline. I liked signing a book deal and saying, okay, now I have 6 months, and not setting goals for myself or setting deadlines for myself or setting a deadline with my Kickstarter audience and then being like, sorry guys, this project's going to be 7 years late. I did enjoy that there was something now forcing me to finish this, and I don't know that I would have finished it otherwise.
So they kind of kept your nose to the grindstone and kept the standards high, and also can broaden out your audience, which might broaden BabylonBee's audience too, and kind of have a nice positive feedback loop there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we can grab a new audience, now they're learning of the BabylonBee, and now we're getting more fans for that it helps snowball for the next book. Whether we were to do a sequel or some other novel or some other book, now we've got a wider audience for the next one. So that's a positive as well.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got you for about 15 minutes left. So I want to ask you about humor. Humor, I'm not super great at it. I'll just be honest. I'm not super great at the jokes, kind of coming up with them in the moment or in the manuscript. Or even like, as an editor, I'm reading the novel and I see a joke and I'm like, oh, it's not quite landing. If I can think of a funnier punchline, I'll suggest it, or I'll like kind of highlight it for my author and give little comments and then come back. But sometimes they just don't come. So I was wondering, like, as a comedian, do you have any tips on how authors, how we can kind of become stronger with our humor, getting those punchlines to land? Any ideas?
Yeah. No.
No.
Be funny.
Just be funnier. I think a key element is not taking yourself too seriously. Being willing to relax, being willing to be the butt of the joke yourself, and not getting too serious. Like if you're trying to use the comedy to make a point, or you want, if I want everybody to think I'm hilarious, I'm probably not going to be hilarious. That's how you become the annoying class clown, you know. But I think if you're more relaxed about it, and like just the things that you find funny as a person, I don't know, just amplifying that same joy and sense of humor to the world is kind of the way that we cultivate that. G.K. Chesterton had an essay called, I think it's called "On Chasing After One's Hat," and he makes the point that like humanity would be way better off if none of us, if all of us were willing to be the butt of the joke at all times. Um, and he uses the image of a distinguished British gentleman who loses his top hat in the wind and he has to chase it down the street. And he says you always see these people that are very upset at, like they're distinguished, and here they are stooping to the level of chasing a hat. And he said the world would be much better if those people were to laugh at themselves and to take great pride and joy in everybody cracking up at them as they chase their hat, And I think there's an element there that God has built into us, the sense of humor that is used to humble us. If you're the one who is willing to laugh at yourself, and that's a key element of the BabylonBee's humor that separated us out from previous conservative attempts to be funny, which were not always funny. It is that we were willing to make fun of ourselves. We made fun of Trump constantly. We make fun of Christians. We make fun of the church. We write articles about the BabylonBee and how stupid we are. And like, I think you need to have that self-effacing element if you want to be funny, because I think it starts there. Obviously, you can use humor for a lot of different purposes. We use it to communicate our worldview. We use it to make fun of our political enemies. We use it to make a point. But I think at its heart, like, you have to be willing to start by making fun of yourself. And if you're willing to do that, you're going to be able to do anything. Also, just as a last note, I think reading really funny authors, you need to input like 20 times as many funny books into your brain as writing that you want to output. So I love for this book, I went back and I reread Douglas Adams and Hitchhiker's Guide. I reread Terry Pratchett and Discworld. I reread The Princess Bride, which is one of the funniest books ever written.
Yes.
Any fiction, because I'm writing humor fiction, so I had to go read humorous fiction and see like what tools did they use, what kind of structures did they use. You can't dissect it too much because that's comedy. If you dissect it too much, it dies. But that at least gets you in the right mindset of, this is the feeling I have reading The Princess Bride. This is the feeling I want my readers to have, and trying whatever that is in my own voice and style. But at least knowing the emotion I'm trying to evoke, I think, was helpful.
I love that you said that, because that is a top 3 note that we constantly hear and say, well, I want to write fantasy and I want it to be like a portal fantasy. It's like, how do I do that? Go read some portal fantasy, figure out what you love about it, what you don't like about it, and then address that in your own writing. So it's just constantly, no matter what you want to write, read it. Read the greats, read the ones that aren't very good, so then you know what not to do, because that's also a good thing to know. But yeah, I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, I think reading outside the genres as well, I think is helpful. You may find tools, you may find writing tools for your little writing toolbox that aren't very commonly used in your space. So like my book being this mashup of Bunyan and Pratchett or whatever is, I had to read allegory, I had to read C.S. Lewis, I had to read Pulp Fiction, I had to read the funny books. So all of that is like, there may be stuff that's outside your your normal wheelhouse that gives you ideas. You know, if I had just read Bunyan to inspire this, we wouldn't have had the humor element. We wouldn't have gotten the idea for the narrator or the more satirical elements of it.
I'm going to add to that on reading outside of what you're writing. Romance. So a lot of people in sci-fi, it's not a romance, but there's a couple characters that, you know, they're getting a little lovey-dovey. But when you're reading it, you're just like, I'm not buying it. So you read romance to kind of see, you know, how you can weave that without it being a romance, but to get the romance so that it comes off good. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, if you want to know what kind of romance doesn't work, you go watch the Star Wars prequels, and then you know I'm not going to write my characters like this. So.
Yeah. Also that.
Yeah, with writing a short article like BabylonBee, you know, you've got your humor, you've got your audience that's right there and it's immediate. But with your novel, a novel is much longer, and the time before you make your joke and before you have your audience there reading your book can be a few years. What have you learned about humor that helps you to be able to make that joke land? Like with the BabylonBee, your audience, if they're Christian conservative, they might read that headline, they might see that meme, and they might laugh. But someone else from another perspective might not get the joke. It might not land right. How do you pick the punchline that a broader audience will laugh at?
Well, I'll say the goal probably isn't like necessarily a broader audience to laugh at, but definitely like we want it to hit the target for which it's intended, and we want it to hit that target for as long as possible. So I think there was an element of timeliness versus timelessness that is different in writing the long form stuff that's going to be in print for years and years, hopefully, versus this, you know, the flash in the pan article that you throw out because there's a news story today that people are going to click on and share and then forget about tomorrow. You know, so we had to be careful with things like pop culture references. The book is filled with pop culture references, but we tried to do ones that were more, you know, 30 or 50-year lifespan or shelf life, and not the ones like, you know, that's not going to make sense anymore when Joe Biden isn't president. You know, like that's kind of we think you do have to think about that kind of stuff. So we were very wary of that early on, just because I have written books before, like with the BabylonBee. This is the first one that isn't technically under the banner of the BabylonBee. It's got my name on the front, which is cool. But the other like satirical works that we've done through the Bee, we had to be mindful of that too. You know, we had to write jokes that like, even as you're writing it, like, yeah, you want it to make sense in 30 years or 50 years, but even you're writing it, you're knowing that, you know, these, I'm sure you guys know, and the audience knows, like books can take years to get published. So it's like I'm writing a joke now that, okay, people aren't going to read this for 18 months. you have to think, is this still going to, like, is Trump still going to be president when this book gets published? Those are questions that you have to ask. So definitely in terms of the comedy, it's like you're trying to hit punchlines that are a little bit more timeless comedy, situational comedy, character-driven comedy, rather than like something that you might see on the BabylonBee about a current news story.
Yeah, but I'm thinking like you want your reader to go on a journey with you and to be kind of changed by the end of the book too. Did you ever change a book or change a scene in order to be able to reach an audience who might not agree with you at the start of the book, but you kind of want them to be with you by the end?
There were certainly, I'm flipping through it right now. There were certainly changes that were made in that direction. I don't know that any of them were specifically made with that goal in mind, like, let's broaden this so that people won't close the book right away, or like, or won't give up after chapter 3. There was some discussion about like, when I first started writing this book, you know, I had this very clear idea of like retell Pilgrim's Progress, but with nods to these kind of niche Christian characters today. And we ended up kind of in a situation where the first characters that are encountered are definitely small, like only people in the really niche core Christian audience would know who I'm talking about. and and I think there's a character that remains in the book that we changed the description of, we changed the name of. It was fairly early on, within the first 8 or 9 chapters, and we changed some of the elements of, because it was very clearly based on a real person, and we both didn't want the drama of like, oh, you guys are being really mean to
Obviously,
this
you were writing
person.
about this
Yeah.
person.
Exactly. We didn't want that. And there was the broadening element of maybe not everybody knows who you're talking about, but everybody knows that kind of person, So we changed the allegorical representation from this is obviously Mr. Bob to this is this kind of character that you meet in Christianity. And I think that really helped to the appeal of that specific chapter, because now you're not going to have people who actually like that guy being like, oh, these guys are so mean to this guy. It's more like, I see the criticism of what you're talking about. It's not so personal. So there were some of those things early on. And we also had to kind of stretch out the character's growth arc so that it wasn't, because I wanted to get right to the jokes right away of like, here's the Christian characters you're interacting with. Here's all the jokes. But I had to actually say, okay, well, this character needs to grow. So we took some lines out of his mouth that didn't quite make sense in terms of character growth until later on. And so you had to sacrifice some things there just to make the longer narrative work.
To give him more of a before and after kind of growth arc by the end of the book.
Yeah, we changed it to, in our writing process, we did kind of eventually step back. While we had a bunch of chapters written, we said, wait a minute, this is all over the place. We stepped back. We wrote a 15-point beat sheet, if you're familiar with the 15-point beat sheet from, what's his name, Snyder, Blake Snyder, Brian Snyder, the guy...
Save the cat guy.
Save the cat guy, yeah. So we actually wrote out a 3-act 15-point bullet point and then said, okay, where does this chapter fit? Does this chapter fit? Does this make sense for character growth at this moment? And so if you read our book and you have Save the Cat next to it, you'll see exactly see exactly how we painted by numbers in that area.
You can go through. And your book's only been out for about a month now. What's the reader feedback been like from reviewers?
We have been blown away. So there's a kind of a spectrum of expectations that you have, from nobody likes this book and you're a horrible person to you are the next Stephen King and you can retire. We didn't hit the Stephen King thing, unfortunately, but we did like just seeing the feedback of the constant 5-star reviews that are coming in and people saying like, I was laughing on one page, I was crying on the next page. That to me was just like such a relief to go, okay, it's doing what we thought it was going to do. People understood the words that came out of my pen, like that was a huge relief. So those stories that are coming in, I have people sending me messages like, I'm going through a hard time in my life, or we recently had a death in the family. I read your book and I was in tears. And, you're just like, oh my gosh, like to be able to have somebody say that to you is like such a relief. And the sales have been fairly strong as far as I can tell. Going through a traditional publisher, it's a little bit different than Kickstarter, where the exact dollar amount that you've made or that you've lost and the exact sales. You don't quite have that information up to the minute from a publisher that you do in Kickstarter. But the publisher seems to be fairly happy with the launch of the book, and we've just been so excited to actually see it get out into people's hands.
So we're very excited for that book and to hear. I'm in the middle of listening it to myself, and I'm looking forward to the end.
Yes.
Did you want to hit any of these audience questions in our last little bit, or did we hit them all?
We hit most of them. One last question. Allie G. Cat asks, if you could tell the whole world one thing, what would it be?
Believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and you'll be saved. That's an easy one.
Amen.
All right. Thank you so much, Kyle, for coming on and sharing your time, sharing the wisdom that you have garnered, and all of the funny little bits that we have yet to enjoy from you and the bee. Everyone in the audience, thank you for joining us. Corey Gilliam, it's very late, but golf clap of appreciation for first posting in there. Patricia Gilliam, Trucker D, Charlie D, hello, everybody else. Are we taking a break on our next one? I don't know if we had solidified that yet or not.
I think we are.
Yes. Okay. So we would normally be back 2 weeks from now, but we need a slight little bit of a break. I am running myself exhausted. So if y'all want to blame me, it's all my fault. It's all me. It's all me. I need a break. Okay. And with that, we'll see you very soon with more reading, writing, and everything in between right here on Keystroke Mediums.